This man has been very prevalent in the news recently, mostly because of social issues, but I'm going to be going in a more environmental direction. Donald Trump's presidency and his administration bring up many different emotions, and they may differ depending on your position on the political spectrum. However, for the sake of this discussion, we're going to largely disregard politics and just focus on the science. I'm going to be explaining the way Trump has affected the environment so far. Spoiler alert, most of the effects are negative. These effects begin with the rebellion of scientists against Trump. In the fear that the Trump administration may attempt to bury or delete important climate research databases, meteorologists and climate scientists scrambled to back up key databases, creating data refuges and a new organization called the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative. The deletion of this information would degrade global efforts to understand our climate system and possibly delay the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report due to the unavailability of a climate model that only exists on U.S. government servers. David Carley, a climate scientist at Melbourne University, explains that this would be a major setback for science. On January 20th, the day of Trump's inauguration, the fears of data becoming less available became true. A large section on climate change, including multiple graphs on renewable energy growth, was removed from the White House's website. The next action Trump took that affects the environment was issuing multiple memoranda which aimed to hasten permission for the Dakota Access and Keystone XL oil pipelines. On March 24th, the Trump administration's State Department grants a permit for the construction of the Keystone Pipeline. The construction would affect multiple parts of the environment, one being its animals. The National Wildlife Federation has reported that there is a risk of the critically endangered whooping crane flying into the new power lines being constructed to keep oil pumping through the pipeline. The construction of this pipeline would also affect the greater sage-grouse. This bird has already lost some of its habitat, and the Keystone XL pipeline will be built close to its mating grounds, potentially impacting the breeding success of the species. The pipelines would also affect climate change. Many climate activists oppose the pipelines because of the belief that they allow for a continued dependence on fossil fuels and delay investment in renewable energy technologies. This dependence is in fact harmful, especially because of the method used to obtain the oil. The oil the pipelines would carry is obtained through extracting it through tar sands, which generates more greenhouse gases than extracting oil through more conventional methods, therefore contributing to more greenhouse gas emissions over time. One of the more direct ways the Trump administration is affecting the environment is by revoking the Stream Protection Rule. The Stream Protection Rule was put in place by the Obama administration shortly before the end of his second term. The rule prohibited coal mining companies from dumping waste into streams. Appalachian Voices, an environmental group, estimates that since the 1990s, over 2,000 miles of streams in the Appalachian region have been buried through mountain removal. Evidence is also accumulating that suggests when mining debris and waste gets into other supplies, such as water supplies, the toxic metals can have intensely negative impacts on the health of the people and local communities. Because the rule preventing such occurrences has been revoked, regulations pertaining to coal mining will now default to the 1983 rule, which, according to the U.S. Department of the Interior, has historically been applied in a manner that allows mining through streams and the construction of excess spoil fields and coal mine waste disposal facilities in perennial and intermittent streams. On March 2nd, U.S. Interior Secretary Ryan Zink rescinds the Obama-era prohibition of lead ammunition on federal lands and waters. Revoking this ban allows hunters to use lead ammunition to hunt on federal lands. This led to backlash from conservation groups, which note that lead ammunition can poison wildlife. In fact, studies have conclusively shown that lead is extremely toxic to birds and mammals, including humans. Lead is harmful and toxic to nearly every single organ in the body, but it is most toxic to the nervous system and brain. Based on the science, the use of this metal in natural environments should be prohibited altogether, but lead ammunition is one of the largest unregulated sources of lead in the environment. David Bellinger, an environmental health researcher at the Harvard School of Public Health, explains that lead is so soft, it fractures and fragments into tiny pieces when it impacts muscle. Because of this, carnivores and human hunters are left to consume carcasses exposed to the metal. And because of magnification through the food chain, The strength of the lead only grows as it moves up the food chain and gets worse for top-tier predators. One particular animal being affected by this action is the California condor, a species whose leading cause of death in juveniles and free-flying birds is lead poisoning. In 1982, there were only 22 condors remaining in the world, but conservation efforts increased the population to 400 by 2010. Though the population has recovered, it is having difficulty becoming stable. Mira Finkelstein, a wildlife toxicologist at the University of Santa Cruz, concluded that if the risk of lead poisoning was not greatly reduced or eliminated, the condors may never be able to establish a self-sustaining population. To get a sense of how this administration will affect the environment, we must also examine the changes it has made to the EPA. The most obvious change is the appointment of Scott Pruitt as chief of the organization. Before his appointment, Pruitt was the Attorney General of Oklahoma, using his position to oppose environmental regulations, describing himself as a leading advocate against the EPA's activist agenda. He actively opposed the EPA's effort to achieve cleaner air and slow climate change by frequently filing lawsuits against the agency. He also denies the validity of climate science, explaining in a CNBC interview that he does not agree that CO2 and human activity are primary contributors to the global warming we see. He rejects the 2014 review done by the National Academy of Sciences, which says that the Earth's warming since the 1970s is mainly a result of the increased concentrations of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. The agency's budget is also undergoing changes. The Trump administration's first preliminary budget outlines severe cuts to U.S. science and environmental agencies, such as the EPA and NOAA, in an effort to increase the already extensive defense budget by $54 million. The focus of the agency is also being shifted, as Scott Pruitt has announced a back-to-basics agenda for the EPA. He describes this agenda as protecting the environment and engaging with state, local, and tribal partners to create sensible regulations that enhance economic growth. He plans to put in motion reviews of two essential regulations put in place by the Obama administration, the Clean Power Plan and the Waters of the United States rule. As part of the shift in the focus, the EPA's Office of Science and Technology has removed the word science from its mission statement. The agency is updating its language to better emphasize economically and technologically achievable performance standards, signifying a shift in focus on environmental protection to economic growth. This is highlighted in the recent criticization of the Trump EPA on an Obama-era rule stating that oil and gas companies would report the industry's methane and volatile organic compound emissions. They say this regulation of information harms the oil and gas industries. So what can we all do to help? Well, you probably already heard of all these actions, but they really do help. Though these are large-scale problems, a lot of these actions slowly accumulate and make a dent in climate change. Some things that we can do are take shorter showers, limit meat and dairy consumption, recycle, limit our use of artificial light, compost, and you can contact your senators and representatives. And if you feel motivated to do so, which I hope you do, because this is a drastic problem, here are the numbers for our North Carolina state senators. And these are my sources. Thank you.